The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with light. Thousands of representatives from 12 powerful species sat in their places. They watched as Speaker Vorthax walked to the center platform. His tall, thin body moved with pride. His silver robes dragged across the floor like liquid metal. 300 years, Vorthax said. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. 300 years of peace. 300 years of order. 300 years since we removed the greatest threat this galaxy has ever known. The representatives made sounds of approval. They remembered the stories. They had all heard about the humans. Humans had been a young species. They came from a small blue planet called Earth, in a system they named Sol. They had only traveled among the stars for 200 years when the Council first met them. At first, the Council thought humans were weak. Their bodies were soft. They lived short lives. They had no natural weapons like claws or poison. But the Council soon learned the truth. Humans were dangerous, not because of their bodies, but because of their minds. They adapted too quickly. They learned too fast. They refused to follow rules. When the Council told them to stop expanding, they expanded faster. When the Council threatened them, they built bigger weapons. When the Council demanded tribute, they laughed. So the Council made a decision. Humans could not be controlled. Therefore, humans could not be allowed to exist. The war was short. 40,000 Council warships came to the Sol system. The humans fought hard. They fought harder than any species the Council had ever faced. But they were outnumbered 100 to 1. Their fleets burned. Their colonies fell. And finally, the Council fleet surrounded Earth itself. They did not invade. They did not negotiate. They simply fired. For 7 days, they bombarded the planet with nuclear weapons and plasma cannons. They turned the blue oceans to steam. They melted the green forests to ash. They cracked the continents and poisoned the air. When they finished, nothing could survive on the surface. The planet was dead, or so they believed. Vorthax smiled as he looked at the Council. The humans are gone. Their world is a tomb. And every species in this galaxy learned the lesson. Obey the Council, or share their fate. The representatives nodded. They had all seen what happened to species that resisted. The Council ruled through fear, and no one was more feared than the memory of what they did to Earth. Far across the galaxy, that dead world floated in silence. The surface was gray and brown, covered in dust and radiation. The oceans were gone. The cities were ruins. Automated Council sentinel ships circled the planet, making sure nothing came close. But deep underground, something still existed. The bunkers had been built in secret. During the final war, human leaders knew they could not win. So they made a different plan. They could not save everyone. They could not save the cities or the nations or the civilization they had built. But they could save something. 200,000 soldiers. The best humanity had. They were placed in cryo chambers deep beneath mountains and oceans. They were hidden in bunkers that were designed to survive anything. Nuclear fire, orbital bombardment, centuries of radiation. They were humanity's last hope. For 300 years, the bunkers waited. The soldiers slept in frozen dreams. Automated systems monitored the surface, waiting for the day when life would be possible again. The machines repaired themselves. The power systems ran on heat from the planet's core. Everything was designed to last. And finally, on a day that no calendar recorded, the sensors detected what they had been waiting for. The radiation levels were dropping. The air was becoming breathable. The planet was healing itself. Deep in the primary bunker, buried 5 miles beneath what was once the Pacific Ocean, lights flickered on for the first time in 3 centuries. Computer screens came to life. Fans began to spin, pushing fresh air through dusty corridors. In a chamber the size of a stadium, thousands of cryopods stood in perfect rows. They were covered in frost and dust. Their status lights had been dark for so long, but now, one by one, those lights began to change. Red turned to amber. Amber turned to green. In one pod near the center of the chamber, a woman floated in frozen sleep. Her face was calm. Her short gray hair was touched with ice crystals. She wore the uniform of the United Earth Defense Force, with the stars of an admiral on her collar. Her name was Helena Vance. She had been the commander of Earth's last defense fleet. She had watched her ships burn. She had given the order for her surviving crews to retreat to the bunkers. She had been the last one to enter cryosleep, promising that she would wake up one day and finish the fight. Now, 300 years later, Her pod began to hum. Warm air flowed across her frozen skin. Her heart, which had not beaten in 3 centuries, started to pulse again, slowly, painfully. Her eyes opened. The first thing she saw was a message on the screen above her pod. It glowed with simple words that changed everything. Awakening protocol complete. Surface conditions. Survivable. Enemy presence. Detected. Admiral Vance. The war is not over. Helena Vance took her first breath in 300 years. It hurt. Her lungs burned. Her muscles screamed. But she was alive, and she remembered everything. She remembered the burning ships. She remembered the dying soldiers. She remembered watching Earth cities turn to fire from orbit. She remembered the promise she made. Around her, more pods were coming to life. More lights were turning green. More soldiers were waking up. The Council thought they had killed humanity. They thought they had won. They had spent 300 years teaching the galaxy to fear the memory of humans. They were about to learn that some things refused to die. Across the galaxy, billions of beings lived under Council rule. They worked, they obeyed, they paid their tribute, and they whispered stories in the dark. The Morovci were small creatures, no taller than human children. They had soft brown fur and large dark eyes. Before the Council came, they had been scientists and explorers. Now they worked in mines, digging precious metals from dead asteroids. Their small hands were perfect for reaching into narrow tunnels. The Thessari were different. They were tall and strong, with hard scales and 4 arms. They had once been proud warriors with their own empire. Now they served as soldiers for the Council, forced to fight against other species who tried to resist. Both species remembered the humans. The Morovci told stories of the strange beings who laughed at the Council. The Thessari spoke with respect about the only species that had made the Council afraid. Even in death, humans were legends. On a space station called Nexus 7, a Morovci named Kira Velshin worked in the shadows. She was an information broker. She collected secrets and sold them to anyone who paid. The Council called her a criminal. The Resistance called her a hero. She did not care about names. She only cared about one thing: hurting the Council. Kira sat in her small room, surrounded by computer screens. She spent her nights listening to signals from across the galaxy. Most of it was boring: trade reports, military orders, Council propaganda. But tonight, something was different. Her computer had detected an old signal. Very old. It came from the Sol system, the forbidden zone where no one was allowed to go. The signal was simple, just a series of numbers repeating over and over. But Kira recognized the pattern. It was a human emergency code. Her heart beat faster. It was impossible. Nothing could survive on Earth. The Council had made sure of that. But the signal was real. She had checked it 5 times. She was not the only one who noticed. In the Council's enforcement headquarters, High Inquisitor Malachar stared at his own screen. He was a Selenari, the same species as Speaker Vorthax, tall and thin, with cold gray eyes that showed no emotion. His job was to find threats to the Council and destroy them. The signal from Sol was probably nothing. Old satellites, still running after 300 years. Broken machines sending random noise. But Malachar was careful. He had not survived this long by ignoring strange things. He sent a scout ship to investigate. 3 small vessels with orders to scan the planet and report back. It was a simple mission. Nothing could go wrong. The scouts arrived at Earth 2 days later. What they found made no sense. The planet was still dead on the surface. But their sensors detected heat signatures underground. Thousands of them. Moving. Before they could send a full report, something rose from beneath the planet's crust. Ships, human ships, old designs that had not been seen in 3 centuries, but updated with technology the scouts did not recognize. The human vessels did not hesitate. They opened fire. The scout ships tried to run, but they were too slow. 2 of them exploded in seconds. The third managed to send one final transmission before it died. Heat signatures rising. Human vessels detected. They are alive. Repeat. Humans are alive. Send help. Send. Then silence. Malachar watched the recording with cold fury. He immediately sent it to Speaker Vorthax. Within hours, the Council was in emergency session. Fear filled the Great Hall for the first time in centuries. Impossible, one representative said. We destroyed them. We killed their entire world. Apparently not. Vorthax replied. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled. We will send a fleet. A large one. We will finish what we started 300 years ago. Deep beneath Earth's surface, Admiral Helena Vance watched her soldiers wake up. The process took days. Cryo sleep was hard on the body. People needed time to recover. They needed food and water and medical care. They needed to understand what had happened. Many of them cried when they learned the truth. 300 years had passed. Everyone they knew on the surface was dead. Their families, their friends, their entire civilization was gone. Earth was a graveyard, but Vance did not let them stay in grief for long. There was work to do. She walked through the bunkers, visiting every section. The facilities were larger than she remembered. Underground factories, weapons, storage, and most importantly, the ship hangars, the Leviathan fleet, 200 warships that had been hidden before the final battle. They had waited 3 centuries for this moment. Vance gathered her officers in the command center. Their faces were tired but determined. I will not lie to you, she said. We lost everything. Our homes, our families, our world. The Council took it all. They spent 300 years telling the galaxy that we are dead, that we are a lesson about what happens when you resist. She paused. Her eyes were hard. They were wrong. We are not a lesson. We are not a memory. We are still here. And now, we are going to remind them why they were so afraid of us. Far away on Nexus 7, Kira Velshen made a decision. She took the scout ship's final transmission, the recording that showed human vessels rising from Earth, and she sent it everywhere. Every resistance network, every hidden channel, every corner of the galaxy where oppressed species dreamed of freedom. Within days, the message spread like fire. The humans were alive. The Council had lied. And somewhere, deep in forbidden space, an army was waking up. Hope is a dangerous thing. The Council had tried to kill it for 300 years. They had failed. The bunkers beneath Earth came alive with purpose. Soldiers who had slept for 3 centuries now worked without rest. They had lost everything, but they had also gained something, a reason to fight. Admiral Helena Vance walked through the underground hangars, watching her fleet prepare for war. The Leviathan-class warships were massive. Each one was half a mile long, covered in thick armor and heavy weapons. They had been designed for one purpose: to kill Council ships. Engineers swarmed over every vessel. They checked systems that had been sleeping for 300 years. Most of the ships worked perfectly. The technology had been built to last. A few needed repairs, but the bunkers had factories for that. Within 2 weeks, 150 ships were ready to fly. The soldiers trained every day. Their bodies were weak from cryo sleep, but their minds were sharp. They remembered their training, they remembered their skills, and most importantly, they remembered their anger. Captain James Okonkwo led a squad of Marines through combat exercises. He was a big man with dark skin and a shaved head. Before the war, he had been one of Earth's best soldiers. Now he was one of humanity's last soldiers. The Council thinks we fight like them, he told his squad. They think war is about numbers and formations. They line up their ships, they follow their rules. They wait for the enemy to surrender. He smiled. It was not a friendly smile. We don't surrender. We don't follow rules. We fight dirty. We fight mean. And we never, ever stop. That is why they tried to kill us. That is why they failed. In the command center, Admiral Vance met with her senior officers. They studied old records of Council military forces. The data was 3 centuries old, but it was better than nothing. The Council has gotten lazy, said Commander Sarah Chen, the fleet's tactical officer. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. They haven't fought a real war since they attacked us. They've been bullying weak species and calling it victory. Their technology has improved, said another officer. But their tactics haven't. They still use the same formations, the same strategies. Vance nodded. Then we will use that against them. We know how they fight. They don't know how we fight anymore. That is our advantage. She stood up and looked at the map of the galaxy on the wall. So many systems, so many species under Council control. And somewhere out there, a Council fleet was coming to destroy them. We have one chance, she said. One chance to break them so badly that they never recover. One chance to show the galaxy that the Council can be defeated. We cannot waste it. In the Council's war chamber, Speaker Vorthax gave orders to his admirals. 8,000 warships would go to the Sol system. It was a massive fleet, enough to conquer most species. Surely it would be enough to destroy a handful of survivors. Kill them all, Vorthax commanded. Leave nothing. Burn their bunkers. Destroy their ships. Make sure that no human ever threatens us again. Admiral Kethrel bowed his head. He was an old warrior, experienced in 100 campaigns. But even he felt uneasy. The humans had surprised them once. They might surprise them again. It will be done, Speaker, he said. The humans will not survive this time. Back on Earth, the moment finally came. The great hangar doors opened for the first time in 300 years. They were hidden in mountains and beneath dried ocean beds. They had been invisible to Council sensors. But now they revealed themselves. Ships rose from the darkness. First 10, then 50, then 100. They climbed through the poisoned atmosphere, through the clouds of dust and ash. They rose past the ruins of dead cities and the graves of billions. They rose into space, where the stars waited. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Resurrection. It was the largest ship in the fleet. From here, she would command humanity's final battle. She activated the fleet-wide communication system. Every soldier, every pilot, every crew member heard her voice. 300 years ago, they tried to erase us. They burned our world. They killed our families. They thought they won. They were wrong. Her voice grew stronger. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not give up. We do not die quietly. Today, we rise. Today, we fight. Today, we show the galaxy that humans are not a memory. We are a promise. A promise that tyranny will always fall. A promise that those who rule through fear will learn to fear us. She paused. The Council wanted to teach the galaxy a lesson by destroying us. Now we will teach them a lesson they will never forget. Across the fleet, soldiers cheered. Pilots powered up their fighters. Weapons systems came online. 200,000 humans, the last of their kind, prepared for war. Kira Velshen watched from her room on Nexus 7 as reports came in. The human fleet was moving. They were not hiding anymore. They were coming out to fight. She smiled and sent another message to the resistance networks. They are rising. Be ready. Our time is coming. On 100 worlds, slaves and servants looked up at the stars and felt something they had not felt in generations. Hope. The humans were coming. And nothing would ever be the same. The Council fleet arrived in the Sol system like a storm of metal and fire. 8,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Admiral Kethrel stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Divine Judgment, and looked at his sensors with satisfaction. The human fleet was waiting for them near Earth. Only 150 ships against his 8,000. The numbers were overwhelming. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. All ships, advance, Kethrel ordered. Standard attack formation. Destroy everything. The Council fleet moved forward. Their ships were elegant and powerful, built by species who had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Their weapons could crack moons. Their shields could stop almost anything. They had never lost a war. Admiral Helena Vance watched them come. She stood on the bridge of the Resurrection, surrounded by her officers. The fear in the room was real. Everyone could see the numbers. Everyone knew they were outnumbered more than 50 to 1. But Vance was not afraid. She was angry. Wait for them, she said calmly. Let them get close. Let them think this will be easy. The Council fleet came closer. 10,000 kilometers. 5,000. 1,000. Kethrel smiled. The humans were not running. They were not surrendering. How foolish. How very human. Open fire, he commanded. 8,000 ships fired at once. The space around the human fleet filled with plasma beams and missiles. It was enough firepower to destroy a planet. But the human ships were already moving. They scattered like leaves in a wind. Council weapons hit empty space where ships had been a second before. Human pilots flew in ways that Council computers said were impossible. They spun and twisted and danced between the beams of death. And then they fired back. Human weapons were different. During 3 centuries of sleep, their engineers had prepared for this moment. They had built weapons designed to kill Council ships. Electromagnetic pulses that fried Council electronics. Kinetic rounds that moved so fast they ignored shields. Missiles that split into 100 pieces. each one seeking a different target. The first council ships exploded before they understood what was happening. Then more, and more. In the first 5 minutes of battle, 300 council vessels became burning wreckage. Admiral Kethral stared at his sensors in shock. Impossible, he whispered. It was not impossible. It was humanity. Admiral Vance pushed her fleet forward, straight into the heart of the council formation. It was insane. It was suicide. No sane commander would attack a larger fleet by diving into its center. But humans had never been sane. They had always been something much more dangerous, unpredictable. All Marine teams, prepare for boarding, Vance ordered. Target their carriers and command ships. Boarding ships launched from the human fleet. Small, fast, and heavily armored. They flew through the chaos of battle, dodging fire from both sides. They crashed into council vessels, drilling through hulls with plasma cutters. Captain James Okonkwo led the first team onto a council carrier. His Marines moved through the enemy ship like ghosts of death. Council soldiers tried to stop them. They were bigger than humans. They had better armor. They had been trained for 1,000 years. It did not matter. Humans fought with a fury the Council had never seen. They used every weapon, every trick, every dirty tactic they knew. When their guns ran empty, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their hands. When they were wounded, they kept fighting. When they were dying, they took enemies with them. Okonkwo found the carrier's engine room and planted explosives. His team fought their way back out as the ship began to tear itself apart behind them. 15 Marines went in, 7 came out, but the carrier was dead, and its 1,000 fighters would never launch. Across the battle, the same story repeated. Human Marines boarded ship after ship. Human pilots flew suicide runs into Council weapon systems. Human captains rammed their damaged vessels into enemy formations, taking Council ships with them when they died. Admiral Kethral watched his fleet dying. 2,000 ships gone. 3,000. 4,000. His crews were panicking. They had never fought an enemy like this. The Council species had learned to surrender when they were losing. They valued survival. They were reasonable. Humans were not reasonable. Kethral sent a desperate message to the Council. They will not stop. They do not fear death. Send everything. Send everything now. On the Divine Judgment's bridge, alarms screamed. A human boarding ship had breached the hull. Enemy soldiers were inside. Kethral called his guards, but it was too late. The bridge doors exploded inward. Through the smoke walked Admiral Helena Vance. Her armor was burned and covered in blood, some of it her own. In her hand was a plasma rifle. Behind her were a dozen human Marines, all of them wounded, all of them still fighting. Kethral's guards tried to shoot her. She killed them in 3 seconds. Then she walked toward the Admiral, who backed away until he hit his command chair. "You cannot win," Kethral said. His voice trembled. "Even if you destroy my fleet, the Council will send more, 100 times more. You cannot defeat us all." Vance looked at him with cold eyes. "We don't have to defeat you all. We just have to make you bleed. We have to show the galaxy that you can be hurt, that you can be broken." She raised her rifle and shot him in the leg. He screamed and fell. "You're going to deliver a message for me," she said. "You're going to go back to your Council, and you're going to tell them what you saw here today. Tell them that humanity remembers. Tell them that we're coming. Tell them to be afraid." She left him alive, bleeding on the floor of his own ship. She and her Marines escaped before the Divine Judgment retreated. The Battle of Saul was over. Of 8,000 Council ships, only 2,000 survived. They fled into hyperspace, carrying stories of human savagery that would spread across the galaxy. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Resurrection and looked at the stars. She had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. "Set course for Selenar Prime," she ordered. "We're going to finish this." The news of the Council's defeat spread faster than light. On every world under Council rule, beings watched the footage in shock. Council ships burning, Council soldiers dying, and humans, the species that was supposed to be extinct, standing victorious among the wreckage. For 300 years, the Council had taught the galaxy one lesson: resistance is death. Now a different lesson was spreading. The Council could be beaten. On mining worlds, Moravzi workers stopped working. They looked at their overseers with new eyes, eyes that no longer held fear. On military bases, The sorry soldiers remembered that they had once been warriors, not slaves. They remembered that their forearms were made for fighting, and they began to wonder who they should really fight for. On 100 worlds, on 1,000 stations, oppressed species began to whisper. Then they began to talk. Then they began to plan. Kira Velshin worked without sleep. The little Moravsi information broker sent message after message. She connected resistance groups that had never known each other existed. She shared information about council weaknesses. She spread the coordinates that would change everything. The humans are going to Selenar Prime, she told her contacts. The council's capital, the heart of their power. If you want to be free, now is the time. Now is the only time. Speaker Vorthax stood in the council chamber and screamed at his admirals. His elegant robes were wrinkled. His perfect composure was gone. Fear made his voice high and thin. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon. Send it all to Selenar Prime. We will crush these humans once and for all. The admirals obeyed. From across the galaxy, council fleets gathered at their capital world. 50,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled. Surely this would be enough. Surely nothing could defeat such power. But as the council gathered its forces, Admiral Vance was not idle. The human fleet had taken damage at the Battle of Sol. Many ships needed repairs. Many soldiers had died. But they did not stop. They could not stop. This was their one chance. The Leviathan fleet jumped to hyperspace. 120 ships, all that remained of humanity's military strength. They were flying toward the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. But they were not flying alone. As the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Selenar Prime, Vorthax laughed. He stood on his palace balcony, watching the tiny human fleet appear in orbit. 100 ships against 50,000. The humans had gone mad. Then more ships appeared. First a dozen, then 100, then 1,000. Ships of every size and shape. Moravsi vessels, stolen from mining operations. Thessari warships that had been hidden for generations. Merchant ships with weapons welded onto their hulls. Fighters built in secret factories. A fleet of the oppressed, gathered from every corner of the galaxy. Kira Velshin stood on the bridge of a stolen cruiser, watching the human fleet with tears in her eyes. They gave us hope, she whispered. Now we give them an army. The Allied fleet numbered nearly 5,000 ships, still outnumbered by the Council, but no longer alone. When Admiral Vance saw them, she felt something she had not felt since before the war. She felt proud. She opened a communication channel to the Allied ships. This is Admiral Helena Vance of the United Earth Defense Force. You don't know me, but you know what we're fighting for. Today, we break the chains. Today, we end the tyranny. Today, we show the galaxy that fear is not stronger than hope. The Battle of Selenar Prime was the largest in galactic history. 50,000 ships fought against 6,000. But numbers are not everything. The Council fought to keep their power. The humans and their allies fought for something greater. They fought for freedom. They fought for revenge. They fought for a future where their children would not be slaves. And they were not afraid to die. Human tactics spread through the Allied fleet. Moravsi pilots learned to fly in patterns that confused Council sensors. Thessari warriors remembered the joy of battle and charged into enemy formations with terrible fury. Every species brought their own strengths, their own tricks, their own hunger for vengeance. The Council fleet began to crack. Crews who had never faced real resistance started to panic. Admirals who had only fought weak enemies made mistake after mistake. Ships that should have supported each other instead fought alone and died alone. The battle lasted for 6 hours. When it ended, the skies of Selenar Prime were filled with burning wreckage. The Council fleet was broken. Only 10,000 ships remained, and most of those were trying to flee. Admiral Vance took a landing force down to the planet. Human Marines, supported by Thessari warriors and Moravsi technicians, fought their way into the Council palace. The Speaker's guards tried to stop them. They failed. Vorthax was hiding in his throne room when the doors exploded inward. He cowered behind his throne as Admiral Vance walked in. She was covered in ash and blood. Her eyes were harder than diamonds. 300 years ago, she said, you tried to erase my people because you were afraid. You were afraid of what we might become. You were right to be afraid. Vorthax fell to his knees. Please. Mercy. I'll give you anything. Power. Wealth. Your own territory. Vance looked at him with disgust. You don't understand, do you? We don't want your power. We don't want your wealth. We want justice. She did not kill him. Death would have been too kind. Instead, she broadcast his surrender across every frequency in the galaxy. Every species, on every world, saw the once mighty speaker on his knees before a human. They saw the council broken. They saw freedom. In the days that followed, the council collapsed. Representatives fled. Fleets scattered. Slave species rose up and claimed their worlds. The empire of fear that had ruled for thousands of years ended in weeks. The Galactic Alliance was born in its place. Humans, Moravsi, Thessari, and dozens of other species came together, not as masters and slaves, but as equals. They began the long work of building something better. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of the Resurrection one last time. She looked out at the stars and thought about everyone she had lost. Her friends, her family, her world. So much had been taken from her, but something had been gained too. Humanity had survived. They had risen from the ashes, and they had helped free an entire galaxy. What now, Admiral? Commander Chen asked. Vance smiled. It was a tired smile, but a real one. Now we rebuild. We help other species heal. We make sure this never happens again. She looked at the stars with quiet determination. We came back from extinction. Compared to that, everything else is easy. Somewhere at the edge of the galaxy, ancient sensors detected the fall of the Council. Something old and powerful stirred in the darkness between stars. It had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Humanity's greatest challenge was still ahead, but that is a story for another day.